One aspect of writing that I feel kind of tends to fly under the radar just a bit is the process of naming. And that's possibly because we don't really think of, or at least about, names in our day to day lives for the most part, except for basically, oh, that kind of sounds good. For example, how does this name sound good with our last name for the baby? Or is my Trish's last name better than mine? We can also think of the acronyms that were clearly thought of in what they spelled out first, sort of way, rather than what actually is this about. Now, in more fantasy and sci-fi oriented works, you can probably do away with what sounds good or what rolls off the tongue or is touchy, as the rules and history of names is up to the writer. And that's one of the points I want to make with this, the rules and history of naming. One thing that's kind of fun to do for me, at least, is opening up a baby name book and browsing through it a bit, especially when it includes the meaning of names. Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about in and of itself, a name having a meaning. Now sure, there are names where that meaning can be pretty clear, because they are based on a word or a place or an object or an event, or they have this suffix, kind of like how most names ending in son mean son of. But then there are the surprising ones, at least when you get to names you know from stories or history. For example, Let's means defender of men, which seems kind of ironic when we will probably often think of Lex Luthor, or maybe it's appropriate considering he's fighting an alien as a human. And that's kind of one of the ways is that the meaning of a name can give another level to a character, especially if they're either living up to that name or are the exact opposite of that meaning, which can be a great way to subvert expectations of a character in ways that are kind of interesting to think about. Another point to think on is the history of names. Needless to say, I think that Adolf is going to be a very rare name to give for the conceivable future. As used to history, we have assigned meaning to it. Which also brings up why so many stories might have references to myths and historical figures. The stories of the past give more meaning to the name, even to the point that the story is more known than the meaning. And come on, let's be honest. When you hear Jonah, you think of whale, not dove. The stories associated with names can be inspirational. Just think of how many things end up getting the name Phoenix in fiction and in life because of the rising from the ashes. But they in turn also bring baggage. And I've probably gotten off pretty easy with the whale jokes in that matter. Although finding one that's actually funny is about as rare as a unicorn. Yet, there is another idea I want you to consider, my friend, and that is on the giving of names. Now, someday I should probably read or watch The Man of Lament in full, because while it does twist the story of Don Quixote a bit, there's something to the story of Dulcinea. Basically, summed up, the story is about a man who ends up with delusions of being a knight, and so seeks out a lady because of chivalry. Yet the woman he treats as that lady, and calls Dulcinea, is not really who most would call a lady of good report. So it plays into his delusions more. But eventually, she is able to see herself as Dulcinea, regardless of the things in her past, and chooses to live as that is her identity. The names we give ourselves and others have a power as long as it's allowed. Again, she had to first accept that she could be Dulcinea. Another example to think of is how people often other others with labels. Like how someone will try to dismiss another's opinion simply because, oh, they have this trait, so they don't actually have any standing on this matter. Yet, the ones who often tend to do that most tend to have opinions on everything, so it kind of gives you another understanding of why they really want to do it. Now, we can allow those labels or criticisms to affect our identity and self-image, becoming the person that they see us as and want us to be so that they can treat us how they want to treat us. But then there are also those who may call us by a different name. Ones that speak not of what we've done or the things that we may feel shame about, Instead, these are people who speak of who we could be, or at least a different way of seeing who we actually currently are. Now, sometimes there may not be anyone who would say that for us. So we may actually, if we want to see a change, we may have to start that process ourselves and start seeing us as someone different. But again, the giving and receiving of names is a choice, especially in regards to the ones we want to keep and which ones we want to give away to others. And as with most choices, it's up to us to decide for ourselves what we want to do with it. So these are just some of my thoughts on how naming is a process that can be a bit overlooked in storytelling as well as in life in general. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well. So why not share them in the comments below? And if you enjoyed this video, you can like and share it so that others can enjoy it as well. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you've been watching Lionsmane Media, where we celebrate stories and the lessons you learn from them. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.